What if I told you that your life is not being shaped by your circumstances, but by something far more silent, far more powerful, and far more dangerous than anything happening around you? Because the truth is, most people are not struggling because life is against them. They are struggling because their mind has been trained to see life in a way that keeps them stuck. Two people can walk through the exact same situation, the same setbacks, the same challenges, and yet one will feel defeated while the other feels driven. One will see loss while the other sees lessons. One will give up while the other grows stronger. The difference is never the world outside. The difference is always the world within, right now, without even realizing it. Your mind is filtering your reality. It is deciding what you notice, what you ignore, what you believe, and what you repeat. And over time, this silent process becomes your identity, your mindset, and eventually your entire direction in life. That means your future is not being randomly created. It is being carefully shaped by the thoughts you allow to dominate your attention today. And here is the part most people never understand. Whatever you repeatedly focus on doesn't just stay in your mind. It grows, it strengthens, it becomes your emotional truth. And your emotional truth eventually becomes your life experience. So the real question is not what life is doing to you. The real question is, what have you trained your mind to see? Because once you learn how to control that, once you learn how to train your mind to only see the good, even in difficult moments, something powerful begins to shift inside you. Your perception changes, your energy changes, your decisions change. And slowly, without forcing it, your entire life begins to move in a completely new direction. Stay with this message until the end, because what you are about to hear is not just motivation. It is a mental shift that can completely change the way you experience your life from this moment forward. Your mind is not a passive recorder of reality, but an active interpreter that selects, organizes, and assigns meaning to everything you experience. And this is where the foundation of perception is formed. Because what you repeatedly focus on slowly becomes the version of reality you begin to accept as truth, even when it represents only a fraction of what is actually present. And this filtering process happens so constantly and automatically that most people never question it, assuming what they see is simply how life is, when in reality it is how their attention has been trained over time, meaning two people can live through the same event and walk away with completely different inner realities, one seeing failure, rejection, and disappointment, while the other sees lessons, direction, and opportunity, not because the event changes, but because the mental filter interpreting it is different. And this filter is built through repetition and emotional conditioning that teaches the brain what to prioritize. So if a person repeatedly focuses on problems, threats, and limitations, the mind becomes sensitive to anything that confirms those patterns, ignoring or minimizing anything positive that does not match the established narrative. And over time, this creates the illusion that life is mostly negative or unfair, even when moments of progress and goodness are present but not acknowledged. And the opposite is equally true. When a person deliberately trains focus toward growth, gratitude, and possibility, the mind begins to collect evidence that supports this direction, reshaping what feels normal. And this is not about pretending difficulties do not exist, but about refusing to let them become the only lens through which everything is judged. Because attention is selective by design, and what you repeatedly notice becomes emotionally amplified, shaping beliefs, decisions, and identity without conscious awareness. And in this way, the mind does not simply reflect reality as it is, but constructs a personal version of reality based on repeated focus patterns that gradually solidify into what feels like truth. And once this loop is established, it begins to reinforce itself through daily interpretation of small events, where neutral situations are given emotional meaning based on previous mental conditioning, and each interpretation strengthens the next one, making the filter more dominant over time rather than weaker. And this is how perception becomes a silent architect of experience, shaping how a person reacts before they even consciously think about it, guiding attention toward familiar patterns again and again, without requiring effort or awareness from the individual, as the mind continues refining what it chooses to see. Attention is one of the most powerful forces in the human experience because it determines what grows inside your emotional and mental world. And whatever you consistently give attention to does not remain neutral, but begins to expand in influence, intensity, and importance within your inner state. Meaning that attention is never just observation, it is activation. Because the moment you focus on something, your mind begins to process it, assign meaning to it, and attach emotional energy to it. And this is why two people can face the same situation, yet experience completely different emotional realities. One may focus on what is missing and feel stress, fear, or frustration, while another focuses on what can still be done and feels calm determination, not because the external situation changed, but because attention selected a different aspect of the same reality. And over time, whatever you repeatedly focus on becomes emotionally amplified. So if a person constantly directs attention toward problems, failures, or uncertainties, the emotional system begins to heighten sensitivity toward those elements, making them feel larger, heavier, and more dominant than they objectively are. And this creates a cycle where negative focus produces negative emotion, and negative emotion reinforces even more negative focus, until the mind becomes trapped in a loop of escalation. But the same principle works in the opposite direction as well, because when attention is consistently placed on progress, gratitude, learning, or possibility, even in small amounts, the emotional system begins to respond by generating feelings of hope, stability, and confidence. And these emotions then encourage further focus on similar patterns, creating a reinforcing loop that strengthens positivity without forcing it. And this reveals an important truth, that emotions are not random occurrences, but responses shaped by what you repeatedly feed your attention. And this means that control over emotional life does not begin by trying to suppress feelings, but by guiding attention with intention. Because wherever attention goes, emotional energy follows, and where emotional energy goes, perception deepens, and what deepens begins to feel like truth. And this is how a person's internal state can shift gradually without dramatic external change, simply through repeated redirection of focus from what drains energy to what builds it, from what limits possibilities to what expands them. And although this process may feel subtle at first, its effect compounds over time until it becomes the dominant emotional pattern that shapes decisions, reactions, and expectations, ultimately influencing the direction of life itself through the simple but powerful mechanism of what is consistently chosen to be noticed and emotionally engaged with repeatedly in everyday thinking and awareness. Repetition is the hidden architect behind belief, because the human mind does not accept ideas as truth instantly. It accepts them gradually through exposure, familiarity, and emotional reinforcement. And what is seen or thought once may be noticed, but what is seen or thought repeatedly begins to feel real, then normal, and eventually undeniable. Which is why the direction of a person's inner belief system is not formed by single moments of inspiration or fear, but by the consistent patterns they rehearse in their thinking, whether consciously or unconsciously. And this means that every repeated thought is not just a mental activity, but a subtle instruction being written into the subconscious mind, shaping how reality is interpreted and what possibilities are considered acceptable. So when a person repeatedly exposes themselves to thoughts of limitation, failure, or lack, the mind begins to treat these patterns as default truth, not because they are accurate reflections of life, but because repetition has given them authority. And the subconscious does not question frequency. It absorbs it, stores it, and eventually expresses it as belief, which then influences decisions, behavior, and emotional reactions without requiring conscious approval. And this is why many people feel trapped in the same outcomes, because their inner dialogue has been rehearsing the same story for years, strengthening the emotional weight behind it until it becomes a fixed lens through which everything is viewed. Yet the same mechanism that creates limitation also creates transformation when directed intentionally. Because when a person repeatedly chooses to think, affirm, or focus on ideas of growth, resilience, gratitude, or possibility, even when it feels unnatural at first, the mind slowly begins to recognize these patterns as familiar. And familiarity is the gateway to acceptance. And acceptance is the root of belief. So over time, what once felt like effort begins to feel natural, and what once felt foreign begins to feel like truth. Not because external circumstances changed, but because internal repetition reshaped interpretation. And this is why lasting change rarely comes from single moments of motivation, but from disciplined consistency in thought direction. Because repetition does not just reinforce ideas, it rewires perception, it strengthens neural pathways associated with certain emotional responses, and it gradually filters attention towards supporting evidence that matches the repeated pattern, making belief less of a decision and more of a conditioned state. And once this internal conditioning reaches a certain depth, the individual no longer has to consciously remind themselves of the belief. It becomes the automatic way they interpret situations, respond to challenges, and expect outcomes, showing that repetition is not simply a habit of action, but a silent force that constructs the architecture of identity and shapes the boundaries of what a person believes is possible in their life. Thoughts shape identity in a way that is far deeper than most people realize, because identity is not something that appears suddenly or is defined only by external labels, but is gradually constructed through the continuous stream of thoughts a person accepts, repeats, and emotionally identifies with over time, meaning that what you think about yourself consistently becomes the internal story you live inside of, and this story eventually determines how you interpret your abilities, your worth, and your potential, not because thoughts have magical power on their own, but because repeated thinking creates emotional familiarity, and emotional familiarity becomes self-definition. So if a person repeatedly thinks of themselves as incapable, unlucky, or not good enough, those thoughts do not remain temporary mental events. They begin to form a framework that influences how every situation is interpreted, causing neutral experiences to be filtered through a lens of limitation, where opportunities may be dismissed before they are even explored, and challenges may feel heavier than they truly are, not because reality demands it, but because identity has already been conditioned to expect it. And over time, this creates a feedback loop where thoughts influence behavior, or reinforces results, and results reinforce identity, locking the person into a cycle that feels personal but is actually constructed through repetition. Yet the same mechanism that builds limitation also builds empowerment when directed consciously. Because when a person begins to repeatedly think in terms of growth, learning, resilience, and possibility, even if those thoughts feel artificial at first, the mind slowly begins to adjust its self-concept to match the new pattern. And identity starts shifting not through sudden transformation, but through gradual acceptance of a different internal narrative, where mistakes are no longer seen as proof of inadequacy, but as part of development, and setbacks are no longer interpreted as permanent labels, but as temporary experiences. And as this shift deepens, perception of self begins to align with the repeated mental focus, causing behavior to naturally follow, decisions to improve, and confidence to build from within, rather than being dependent on external validation. And this process shows that identity is not fixed, but is continuously written by the thoughts a person allows to dominate their inner dialogue. Because the mind does not separate thought from truth when it is repeated often enough, it merges them, and once merged, those thoughts begin to feel like identity itself, shaping how a person speaks, reacts, chooses, and even what they believe they deserve in life, making inner conversation one of the most powerful forces in determining who a person becomes over time and how they position themselves in every area of experience without needing external instruction or awareness of the transformation taking place internally. Negativity is not a fixed truth about life. It is a learned pattern of thinking that develops over time through repeated exposure, emotional conditioning, and environmental influence, which means it is not something a person is born with, but something they gradually adopt as their default way of interpreting events. And this is important because anything that is learned can also be unlearned and replaced with a new pattern. Yet most people never question their negativity because it feels automatic, as if it is simply their personality or how the world actually is, when in reality it is a mental habit strengthened by repetition, where the mind has been trained to scan for problems, dangers, failures, or disappointments more quickly than it scans for possibilities, progress, or solutions. And over time, this repeated focus creates a bias in perception, where negative information feels more believable, more urgent, and more emotionally charged than positive information, even when both exist in the same situation. And this is why two individuals can experience identical circumstances and yet interpret them completely differently, one seeing only what is wrong and reinforcing frustration, while the other sees what can be improved and maintains emotional balance, not because reality is different, but because mental training is different. And once a negativity habit is formed, it begins to operate automatically, filtering thoughts before conscious awareness can even intervene, which makes it feel like negativity is an identity rather than a choice. But the truth is that habits of thought are built through repetition, just like physical habits are built through repeated actions, meaning every time a person reacts with complaint, fear, or pessimism, they are strengthening a neural pathway that makes that response easier in the future. while weakening alternative pathways that support calm, clarity, or optimism. Yet because the brain is adaptable, these pathways can also be reshaped through intentional focus, where a person deliberately begins to question automatic negative interpretations and replace them with more balanced or constructive perspectives, not by denying reality, but by expanding it to include possibilities that negativity tends to ignore. And over time, this conscious redirection weakens the automatic dominance of negative thinking, gradually replacing it with a more stable and controlled mental response, where challenges are still recognized but no longer exaggerated into absolute outcomes. And this shift does not require eliminating problems from life, but changing the mental reaction to them. Because negativity thrives not on events themselves, but on repeated interpretation. And once interpretation changes through awareness and consistent practice, the emotional weight attached to situations begins to reduce, allowing the mind to regain flexibility, clarity, and the ability to respond rather than simply react from conditioned fear or assumption, which ultimately proves that negativity is not a permanent state, but a retrainable habit of perception shaped entirely by how often and how strongly it has been reinforced over time. Focus determines future because the direction of your attention today quietly becomes the foundation of your tomorrow, shaping not only what you notice in life, but also what you consistently move toward, invest energy in, and eventually become aligned with, since the mind does not treat attention as a passive act, but as a signal that tells it what matters most. And whatever repeatedly receives that signal begins to grow in influence over thoughts, decisions, and behavior, even without conscious awareness, meaning that focus is not just about what you think in the moment, but about what you are programming your mental direction toward over time. And this is why two individuals living in the same environment can end up in completely different life paths, because one person's focus may consistently stay on problems, limitations, and distractions, while the other person deliberately directs focus toward learning, solutions, and opportunity. And over time, these repeated focus patterns accumulate like silent building blocks that construct very different outcomes, not through sudden change, but through gradual alignment between attention and action. Because where attention goes, energy follows, and where energy is consistently invested, habits begin to form, and those habits eventually create results that appear external but are actually the reflection of internal focus patterns. And this process works continuously whether a person is aware of it or not, which means that even small daily choices about what to dwell on, what to ignore, and what to prioritize mentally are shaping the long-term direction of life more than occasional major decisions, because focus acts like a steering mechanism for perception, filtering reality to highlight certain possibilities while hiding others. And over time, this filtering effect strengthens into expectation, where the mind begins to assume that what it has repeatedly focused on is what life will continue to deliver, reinforcing a self-fulfilling pattern that aligns belief with attention. And once belief is aligned with focus, action becomes more automatic, because people naturally move toward what they consistently think about and emotionally engage with, whether it is growth or limitation, opportunity or fear, expansion or stagnation. And this is why focus is not simply a mental activity, but a directional force that shapes identity, behavior, and ultimately destiny. Since every outcome in life begins as a repeated point of attention long before it becomes a visible result. And the more consistent that attention becomes, the more powerful its influence grows, until it defines not only what a person sees in their present moment, but also what they unconsciously expect and create in their future experiences. In conclusion, the true transformation of a human life does not begin in the external world, but in the quiet direction of the mind. What you repeatedly choose to see, think, and focus on gradually becomes the foundation of your reality. Life does not simply happen to you, it is interpreted by you. And that interpretation dictates our minds, your emotional state, your decisions, your habits, and ultimately the path your life takes. When the mind is trained to notice only problems, it builds a world of limitation. But when it is disciplined to recognize goodness, possibility, and growth, even in small forms, it begins to reshape experience from within. This is not about ignoring difficulties or pretending challenges do not exist, but about refusing to let them become the only language your mind speaks. Every thought you repeat, every emotion you strengthen through attention, and every belief you reinforce through focus is silently constructing your future. The mind is always working, always filtering, always creating meaning, and the direction you give it today becomes the reality you live in tomorrow. If you learn to master your attention, you begin to master your interpretation. If you master your interpretation, you begin to master your emotional world. And if you master your emotional world, you begin to shape your destiny with clarity and intention instead of reaction and confusion. The power was never outside of you. It has always been in how you choose to see what is already in front of you. Good luck to you on your journey of mastering your mind and transforming your life from within. May you develop the strength to guide your focus with intention, the discipline to protect your thoughts, and the wisdom to always look for growth even in difficult moments. Thank you for taking the time to reflect on these ideas and invest in your inner development.